Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you can see from our front screen there, tonight's session is about high quality learning, and I'm joined by Mrs. Perry, who's our assistant head in charge of teaching and learning in the secondary school. So some details about tonight before we move on. It'll be just a fairly brief introduction from me. I'll just be covering the high level strategic type approach we have to high quality learning throughout the whole school. So it's not just the secondary school, it's the primary school as well. And then I'll be talking about how we seek external validation for what we're doing in the school, because it's all well and good us saying we do a good job, but we need other people to come in and validate that. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the strategic direction and the strategic plans we have for teaching and learning and other things in the school moving forward. So to start us off today, I'm just going to look at the different agencies and organisations who validate our school. And as you can see there, of course, we are a school that's owned by International Schools Partnership. They are an organisation who are very focused on learning. They have a director of learning for the Middle East, and they also have a learning team based in head office in London and also Madrid as well. So we will spend a lot of time talking to International Schools Partnership about our learning. They don't define what we do, but we share our plans with them. We make sure that they're comfortable with the approaches we're taking, but they do give us a great degree of independence because they firmly believe that every single school is different, and we can contextualise our approaches to what we feel is right for our students. You can see there as well, we are a CIS, a Council of International Schools member school. So CIS, we're 2/3 of the way through a process to become a full CIS school. We've been through a membership visit. We've been through what they call a preparatory evaluation. And these are two events where people have actually visited the school. What the membership visit was a face-to-face visit pre-COVID, and the preparatory evaluation was a virtual visit where we had somebody employed by CIS coming into the school, but also what they call a peer evaluator. And that was a principal of a school in Germany who also came to have a look at what we were doing. And we received a report, and I'm pleased to say that we were given the go-ahead to go through to the final stage to become a full CIS school. So we're really pleased about that, and that'll help us in our journey of school improvement as well. We're also a member of COBIS, which is the Council of British International Schools. COBIS is a great organisation for us to be part of, because not only does it validate what we do in the school in terms of not just teaching and learning, but everything to do with safeguarding, facilities, recruitment, and all of our policies and procedures, but it also provides a number of opportunities for our students to get involved with. So for instance, a couple of years ago, when we were allowed to send our school trips, our head boy and head girl went to the annual conference for student leadership, and that was in Madrid. And they've subsequently they have started to have more virtual competitions. So we've had virtual Model United Nations, we have art competitions, math competitions, English competitions, etc., etc. We're also accredited by the Qatar National Schools Accreditation Organisation. They come into the school once every 3 years, and they look at, again, the whole picture. They have a deep dive into all of our procedures, look at our teaching and learning, and they look with a particular focus on things like our how we deal with national identity, how we also deal with Arabic teaching, Islamic studies teaching, and how we look at Qatar history. But they do look at absolutely everything in terms of teaching and learning across the whole board, and not just necessarily those subjects. And the final one is one that we're now concentrating on. So when I started the school in 2017, British Schools Overseas Inspection, which is, for those of you who may be familiar with the UK way of working, is the equivalent of the Overseas Ofsted, which is the Office for Standards in Education for the UK. And the BSO will come with a UK-based framework that very much looks at teaching and learning and quality of teaching and learning. And they'll start to look at, they'll actually rate the school in terms of whether we are outstanding, good, etc., etc. Looking particularly at going into lessons, observing teaching, looking at student progress, looking at our policies and procedures, looking at our curriculum. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Now, the one thing I'll say about BSO before I move on is that BSO are an organisation that because of the rigour of their inspection system, they would not do any virtual inspections, which is why the delay in getting through BSO has existed, because we need to make sure we're in a position to be able to have them in the school with a team of people to be able to visit classrooms rather than going on online, which other organisations are prepared to do. So the slides you can see in front of you there, I obviously don't expect you to read absolutely everything that's on there. It's It's a representation of how we think very deeply about teaching and learning in the school. So it's not just a cursory thing for us, it's something that we care a great deal about. We realise that it's very much our core business, and we need to therefore focus our energies on making sure that we have high quality teaching and learning within our classrooms. So a few things just to highlight there. You can see that we have a performance management system which very much supports staff development and about staff focusing on getting better from a teaching and learning perspective, making sure that the senior leadership team meetings are almost entirely focused on teaching and learning. And we also talk about what we're going to do to make it better, not just talk about the here and now, but plan for the future. You can see the bullet points in green talk about these are the different elements we want to see in our lessons, because we believe that this represents high quality teaching and learning. We have CPD to develop our teachers. We're developing our use of data. We have a structure in place to make sure we're monitoring progress. We look at the curriculum. And I think the last one there is a really important one for us, and that's all about accountability, because everybody at every level has accountability for making sure we have high quality teaching and learning. So it'll be the SLT putting the strategic plans together, the middle leaders. By middle leaders I mean people like head of maths, head of English, the progress leaders, the year group leaders, who will have responsibility for the quality of what goes on within their teams. And then of course we talk about our teachers, and our teachers are leaders of learning in their own classroom, so they will have responsibility for making sure that it functions effectively there. So our overall strategic plan, I'll talk a little bit about that, and our strategic areas of focus. And you can see the first one there, and the most important one, as I said before, is looking at the quality of education that's provided at the school. So split up into 6 different areas. We look at the teaching, we look at assessment, how much progress our students are making, and there are a variety of different ways we will look at that. We look at our curriculum and how well that's built to meet the needs of our students. It's not just about particular middle groups of students or high groups of students or lower groups of students. We need to make sure our curriculum is designed to meet all of the needs of all of our students. The development of learning behaviours, and we talk about our pride learning behaviours. We talk about perseverance, responsibility, independence, dedication and engagement, and making sure that the students know what they mean, and we celebrate those in various different ways as the year goes on with our pride awards and assemblies. And the final thing we look at, which is a byproduct really of everything above, is attainment. And as you know, we are one of the highest attaining schools in terms of our external examination results anywhere in Qatar. Second thing is we look at the personal, social and cultural development. So we look at personal responsibility and social responsibility, and this is making sure that people understand that they are also leaders of their own learning, and they have to have the attributes and independence to be able to take control of that the further up the secondary school they get, because actually what we're doing ultimately is preparing our students for the next stage of their journey. So that would mean if they're leaving year 13, for instance, going on to university, where they have to be much more independent about what they do. Social responsibility, so looking at the problems of the world, realising that the world exists beyond Qatar, and there are many different issues and problems that the world has to deal with. And then finally, we're looking at our home nation, so looking at Qatari culture, making sure we're fulfilling the requirements of the Qatar curriculum, such as Qatar history for those who don't study Arabic and Islamic studies, but making sure we cover all those points as well. But not only that, really using Qatar and the Middle East and those kind of experiences within the whole of our curriculum to start to bring it alive, but also bring in elements of people's own culture and celebrate the cultural diversity of the school. With over 70 different nationalities in our school, we should be very proud of that, and we should also make sure that we really capitalise on that cultural diversity so people get an understanding. And I think that's the beauty of international schools and international schools of parkhouses kind of genre, because we actually have such a wide range of nationalities within our school and can really appreciate the international nature of what we do. And then the third thing we look at is the protection and support of students. That goes into all important safeguarding. Really, that's our #1 priority, making sure our students are safe and happy coming to school, having procedures in place to deal with any issues we may have, but also looking at health and safety, making sure that the school is a safe place to be. And then the quality of support. So this comes down to the pastoral support for our students, that when things don't quite go right or the students need a little bit of extra support, then we do have a structure in place and we're able to deal with that, and we're able to communicate around the school to make sure that everybody knows. And you may well know from some of the communications we've sent out recently that we have a wellbeing advisor now in the school as well. We feel that's very important post-COVID, because the students, some students have coped really well with it. Some students haven't coped quite so well with it, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we're offering support to those students so they can make sure they get back on track and their progress at school isn't impeded by it. And then moving on to the last three, the fourth area, we talk about recruitment. This is what we're doing at the moment. We're going through our intentions for staff, so we're looking at who's going to be here next year and who's moving on, and therefore putting our plans in place to make sure we can get the best possible replacements. The reason why we do it this early in the school year is because we do want to get the best quality replacements, and I will be with Mr. Moyes and Miss Hilton and various other people within the schools with support of HR, going to the UK, doing virtual interviews, really putting people through a rigorous selection criteria so we can make sure we have the very best people to teach our students next year. The fifth one, which has been perhaps not something that we've managed to really capitalise on during COVID due to the fact that we have a rather closed school site to those people who are not part of our direct community, like the students, teachers and staff, where we can't have our parents, unfortunately, on school premises. And we've had to resort to virtual means, which have been fine for lots of things, with parents' evenings and events such as these. But what we want to do is continue to develop our community partnerships, our home partnerships, because they are really critical, I think, for making sure that everyone feels part of the Park House family. And one of the things we were very keen to do, and I think we've been reasonably successful doing, and that is making sure that when we transition from the Brennan family ownership to ISP ownership, is the community feel of the school wasn't lost, even though we may have grown in size a little bit. And then finally, we need to look at our leadership. So is the quality of leadership in the school where we want it to be? And that's talking about me, it's talking about the senior leadership team, it's talking about the middle leadership team. And as I said earlier, we consider all of our teachers to be leaders of learning in their own classroom. So making sure that the quality of leadership is where it needs to be. And finally, of course, importantly, for us to be held accountable to what we're doing up at the highest levels. So we have a governance structure, and that governance structure is through ISP. We do have some representatives of our teacher body on there as well. So I chair our governing body. We have representatives. So the regional managing director is part of our advisory board. The director of projects from ISP is part of our advisory board. We have a representation from primary and secondary and from our administrative functions. And what we'll do when that starts to develop a bit more is we'll start to have some parental representation as well. So that governance is very important to us to make sure that we just have those quality checks and get some opinions as well. So that's all I wanted to say tonight, really. I'm going to move on to hand over to Miss Perry, who's going to give a little bit more information about the various things we've got in front of you and talk about some more details about high quality learning and what high quality learning means at Park House.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to Mr. Smith for my introduction. My name is Mrs. Perry, and I'm an assistant head teacher in the secondary school who is responsible for teaching and learning. Next slide, please. So whilst COVID has been an immense challenge for all in education, as a staff we have quickly adapted our own unique practices, whether that be distance learning, blended learning or face-to-face learning with COVID restrictions. Yet despite the challenges, last year we were able to reflect on our own practice and refocus our teaching and learning priorities at the school. So myself and the senior leadership in both primary and secondary and our teaching and learning working party had many discussions on what was needed to move forward to achieve high quality learning at Park House. So we carried out our own informed research and we took inspiration from educationalists who are extremely well respected within our profession. Researchers such as Rosenshine, Sean Allison, Andy Tharby, the Learning Scientists and the Education Endowment Foundation, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So our new and revised whole school framework for teaching and learning is underpinned by 6 key principles. Challenge, explanation, modelling, questioning, deliberate practice, feedback, and that all kind of equates to progress over time. So in the next 6 slides, I'll break down each principle and explain why they are important to us as a school and why they will be at the core of everything we do to move forward as a school. So challenge is by far our first and most important principle, and we challenge our students so that they have high expectations of what they can achieve. So what do we mean by challenge as teachers? Well, when we consider how teachers approach a lesson, Challenge is about providing students with difficult work that makes them think deeply and engage in a healthy struggle. But there can be misconceptions with challenge. Yet we at Parkhouse recognise that challenge is for all of our students, regardless of their academic ability. So challenge is all too often seen as providing for the most able students. And as you know, teachers at Parkhouse, we recognise the importance that we plan lessons that allow for all of our students to work outside of their comfort zone, because we feel that when students are stretched, they are likely to learn the most. So in order to do that, teachers need to differentiate the learning that happens. So we expect all of our teachers to set the bar high for all students, of course, so that they can aspire and reach the learning objectives of each lesson. And that during those lessons, teachers are responsive to the students so that they provide support where is needed. So we have high challenging outcomes, and then where students are struggling and not potentially achieving what they could, we put scaffolding support in place so that that is achievable. Next slide, please. We then move on to our second principle, which is explanation. And we do that so students can acquire new knowledge and skills. So for many years within our profession, the concept of teacher talk has been considered to be inhibiting student progress, and that teacher talk should be kept to the very minimum. However, when we did our recent research, evidence actually suggests that high quality teacher talk is one of the key ingredients to students achieving excellence. So when we look at what those key ingredients are at Parkhouse, we think that students should try and link this new explanation to something that they already know. And we ask them to look at abstract ideas and ask teachers to link learning to something that students are familiar with. So like real life examples, whether that be in business studies and looking at real life businesses. And then try and relate that to something concrete so it sticks in their long-term memory. We encourage all of our teachers to have short explanations to break that down into manageable chunks so that students can actually grasp that new learning. But whilst teacher talk is vital for student success, it shouldn't be seen as a piece of theatre. By that I mean it shouldn't be a monologue type scenario in a classroom. It needs to be a two-way process where there is dialogue between the teacher and the students, so that those explanations are shaping their learning and that it has the greatest impact. We then move on to modelling. So modelling is our third principle. And after we have our teachers explaining key concepts, key knowledge, we then ask teachers to model that knowledge so that students can apply it to skills. So what is it? Modelling is a key element to be used in teaching in order for students to learn how to do something. So they need to be able to watch the expert teacher, and the teacher will guide them through a process step by step. So that might be some live modelling on a whiteboard. They might be looking at an extended piece of writing where students need to see what that benchmark of excellence is. And it's very visual, and then gradually teachers will be doing all the model, but gradually that will be taken away, those scaffolds will be taken away so that students can engage in independent practice. So when we were looking at modelling, as mentioned earlier, we focused on the research of Barack Rosenshine, and he has a very famous paper called Principles of Instruction. Rosenshine found that modelling a procedure in small step-by-step chunks, then providing opportunities for focused practice, followed by more modelling and practice, is far more effective in supporting students grasp those processes and concepts in lessons. Now our teachers are modelling every lesson, every day, and we always encourage teachers not to make assumptions with students learning and that they automatically know how to do something. So this year, as part of our CPD, we've really focused on providing high quality models that benchmark excellence. Questioning, well, we question naturally in our lessons, it's ever present, and we do this so that students think hard with breadth, depth, and of course accuracy. Now, questioning kind of comes in parts, lots of different parts in our framework. So when we're challenging students, we question. When we're explaining, we create that dialogue with students and we question. And when we model, again, live modelling, we question. So questioning is really important, and it allows teachers to deepen and develop that student understanding. And as teachers at Parkhouse, we do try and embed a culture where simple or incomplete answers are not accepted. we try and dig deep for more and more to really get that information into their long-term memory. And at the same time, if we want our students to think deeply, we must allow them thinking time. This is extremely important. And the more that we, embed good questioning in our classrooms, the more we'll develop high levels of academic rigour, which leaves, less chance of knowledge being unchallenged, and it means that your children will be learning better as well. Deliberate practice is our fifth principle. So once teachers have planned their lessons and they have ensured challenge is evident, once they have explained key concepts, modelled those key concepts, and included question in all part of those principles, students will carry out some deliberate practice. And we do that so that they recall knowledge effortlessly. You might have heard of the phrase practice makes perfect. We look at the phrase practice makes permanent. And if we want our students to improve, then we must allow them time for students to conduct that quality practice. And it is our role as a teacher to shape the learning so that those misconceptions, that misunderstanding of a key concept doesn't become a fixed mistake, where that is something that, is embedded into their long-term memory equally. This year we've looked at two types of practice when it comes to deliberate practice and practice for fluency. The first one, practice for fluency, is where knowledge is established in the student's long-term memory, allowing them to recall information without a great deal of effort. And then deliberate practice, which is the key principle, is where students are involved in a healthy struggle. So they are being challenged regardless of their ability. And that challenge allows them to either meet the learning objective of that lesson or to exceed the learning objective also. So, of course, the amount of practice in one lesson will differ. It will differ lesson to lesson. It will differ in different subjects. And that is determined by the confidence of the students in assessing that new material that they've done. So as teachers, it's our job to carefully monitor that performance and to make decisions on whether to increase the level of independence or whether we need to add some additional scaffolding before we can, before the students can engage in deliberate practice and independent practice. And our last principle is feedback. So once students have engaged in some independent practice, we will provide feedback, and that is to ensure that they're further developing their knowledge and skills. So the process of providing students with feedback is a key principle of our learning, and that will happen naturally through verbal feedback, through questioning, but also through written feedback when teachers are marking exercise books and when they're marking summative assessments. So students need to be provided with timely and precise feedback to keep them on track. And this just ensures that they're learning in the moment, but also that they're being stretched and pushed so that they continue learning and moving on to the next objective. The research that we did for this is that we looked at the Education Endowment Foundation, and they have a toolkit that explores a range of education, and they often rate that research. So when they've looked at feedback, they rate it as having one of the highest impacts on student attainment. Now, teachers will differ using the different strategies, whether that be verbal feedback or written feedback. But one thing that we do say is that all feedback should be responsive, and that any kind of feedback given should inform that teacher of how to plan their next lesson or a series of lessons in the future. So how are we actually achieving this? We've gone through and looked at our teaching and learning framework and talked about why those principles are key to moving forward as a school. And this year we've focused on numerous things to try and incorporate and embed that new framework at our school. So you may be familiar with Mr. Robson's Parkhouse Connects, where he looked at Cat 4 data. Our teachers have been very busy we're looking at the Cat 4 data and using those indicators to plan their lessons. So seeing what the pace, looking at the different abilities in their classes, using it to create their seating plans, and looking at where students need to be challenged, looking at their attitudes to learning, And this is just not only from the Cat4 data, but it's also from in-house assessments that we've carried out, like the progress test in English and maths as well. Staff have actually had CPD on this and had time to look at it together in departments and look at similarities, talk about student progress, and to collaborate with each other across the different subjects also. Further to this, we're carrying out learning walks and observations. This has always been part of our practice, but obviously with the new framework, the observations have changed ever so slightly. So learning observations take place 3 times a year, once every term. And staff were introduced to the new framework, and we as senior leadership said, these are what we are focused on. We're focused on these 6 key principles. We have a framework, as you can see on the left, and we kind of rag that. So this is what we do not expect, and then green being this will be outstanding practice. Usually the observations are paired, so it will be in the first instance, for example, in term 1, it is being senior leadership with a middle leader, so a head of department, and that's just to ensure consistency across the school. After that observation, teachers go away and they reflect on their learning, their lesson, and they will then break down each principle. So they will think about the challenge in that lesson, and they will say what went well and what they could have done to improve the challenge in that lesson, for example. We then, the 2 observers will sit down with that teacher, and we will go through this reflection sheet. And after we've talked about the 6 principles, we will then look at their potential areas of development, and we will look at possible professional development that they may need to support them with their teaching. Equally, we have learning walks, and learning walks are more frequent, but they're more informal, and they can last anything from 5 to 10 minutes. And the reason we do this is to get a clear picture of what's happening across the school in terms of quality of provision. Often it is to drill down into a particular aspect of provision, so whether that be how much support is put into place for our EAL learners, our English as additional language learners, whether we're comparing the progress of boys to girls, whether we're tracking a particular pupil, or simply just checking that a policy is being implemented consistently. We do learning walks and observations to identify strengths in our teaching practice, where we identify staff as having a particular strength where they can share their expertise and share best practice in the school. And we also do it to identify training needs and our own areas of professional development as a school. And finally, we use our learning walks and observations to create our own objectives in our whole school improvement plan. Next slide. And my final thing that we're doing this year is we've really built our in-house CPD program. We call it Parkhouse Shares. And for this year, we're looking at those 6 key principles and delivering either CPD on inset days or on a Sunday after school. We have CPD every week. So far, some of the things that we've looked at this year so far are questioning, explanation and modelling. We've recently done something called cake and structures, which is collaborative learning during these COVID times. We've looked at Cat4 data in a lot of detail, and that will continue into term 2 and term 3. The in-house CPD is generally what we consider to be our priorities in the school. We then have external CPD, which teachers can request, and that is often more subject specific. And then in the last 2 years, we have created working parties. We have one teaching and learning working party, and the second is in English as an additional language party. And those working parties are made up of secondary staff who are interested in either field, and it's really it's great for their development, but it's great to have their contributions to know what's going on well in the school and where they feel like we need to develop as well. There are going to be more working parties that pop up in term 2. For example, we have one that's going to be developed for digital teaching and learning also. We'll now move on to some question and answers. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Smith. But thank you for listening.
That's Perry. That was interesting to hear all of that, I'm sure, for everybody listening, and I'm sure people can appreciate the complicated nature of what we do as well. So it's a lot of information. We'll be publishing this Parkhouse Connects on our website as well, So anything you've missed, you can go back and it'll be available for those who weren't able to attend. I did write a little bit earlier on in the presentation in the question and answer section that you could write questions. So if you want to ask a question, you just go on to the Q&A part. There should be a little speech bubble at the top of your screen. You can click on that. You can type a question. It comes to us and then we can deal with that. So I'll just give you 30 seconds or so now to see if anybody has any questions. Please feel free to type them. And if we haven't got any questions, then we can move on from there. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Okay, everyone, thank you for that. We don't have any questions coming through. As I say, if you do have any further questions, then you're more than welcome to reach out to the school to ask via Mr. Moyes, Mrs. Perry, me, or indeed anyone else in the school, so you can understand a little bit more if you've got something that needs clarifying. We really do want you to make sure that you're involved in this so that you've got everything you need to be able to do that. So thanks for attending tonight. We really appreciate your time. We'll see you very soon with the next Parkhouse Connects. And get in touch with us if you need anything else. Thanks, everybody.